Between now and Easter, we're going to be focused on a combination of the fruits of the Spirit, as Paul describes them in the book of Galatians, and the spiritual disciplines, a traditional focus during Lent, which will start in just a few weeks. To kick that off, I wanted to talk about the best Sunday of my ministry to date, which happened in Dover, New Hampshire on the 2nd of November in 2003. Just over a week before that, the church was contacted by the Dover Police Department to say that they had just given out a permit to protest to the Westboro Baptist Church. It was going to come and picket our church the next Sunday. So that was like a Saturday. We had one Sunday and then a week and then that next Sunday. Identified by the Southern Poverty Law Center as a hate group from Topeka, Kansas, Westboro is focused on an anti-LGBT agenda. They're best known for protesting at the funerals of U.S. soldiers, rejoicing in their deaths, which they believe are God's punishment on the country for tolerating homosexuality. One hallmark of the group is its hateful signs, just especially hateful signs, and the way that their protesters are in people's faces screaming their hate in the name of God. The group is not known for violence, but one of their goals is to incite those that they're protesting to respond to their vitriol with violence themselves. Fred Phelps, the late Westboro leader and patriarch, was an attorney, as were several of his family members. And if they could manage to provoke someone to take a swing at them, then the lawsuit would be on your desk before they even got home. And in winning those lawsuits, they would finance their next hate trip. The Dover police wanted to give us a heads up so that we could do whatever we felt was necessary to prepare for that protest on November 2nd. They were going to be picketing during the half hour between our two Sunday morning services, so that they would get maximum exposure both to those leaving the first service and those arriving for the second service. As I spoke with individuals in the congregation, people were afraid. Families didn't want their children exposed to those signs. They were afraid that something might escalate and there would be violence. They wondered aloud if we should cancel church that week. The Sunday before, about a day or so after we got the notice, I presented our plan. First, we were going to have only one service instead of two, and that one service wouldn't be at either of the other times. We would have one service that straddled them both so that we would all have arrived and be in church before, during, and after their protest time. We would not see them. Second, we covered our regular church sign, which was out by the road, with a large sign that said, "God is love," being sure to include the scripture passage, 1 John 8b, to remind the folks of Westboro that God is love is actually a Bible verse. Since they were not allowed to come onto private property of the church, they would have to have their protest right next to that sign, putting our message of love right in the midst of their message of hate. And then lastly, I printed up piles of 8.5 by 11 God is Love signs for people to take home with them. I encouraged people to take as many as they needed and to have them in their cars as they came to church the next week. That way, if there were any signs of the protesters, if they'd gotten wind of our switch or whatever, the children could hold those signs up in the car window with the message facing out, and that would block the children from seeing the hate on the other side and would be our message of counter-protest that the protesters could see. The sermon that Sunday before was focused on our core message, God is love. We finished church, people took their signs, and then we waited for the week. Coming to the present day for a moment, before we go back there, We talked here all fall about spiritual transformation and growth. And between now and Easter, we're going to focus on that combination of the fruit of the Spirit and spiritual disciplines. What I want to emphasize in my story about Dover is that for that congregation, there was no better exercise in spiritual development than that long, fretful week between those two Sundays. The town of Dover on the New Hampshire seacoast is relatively affluent and almost entirely white. The church itself is situated on a lovely river in a quiet neighborhood. The vast majority of the people in that church had never in their lives been forced to confront the question of whether it was physically safe to go to church. They'd thought about that for other Christians in other places, but never for them. Not right there, not in Dover. During that long week, they revisited all the things that they previously imagined they might do if they were actually some of those persecuted Christians. Whether that meant Christians in black churches under threat from white supremacists who might bomb or shoot them on a Sunday morning, or Christians in another part of the world or in the days of the early church where their faith was actually banned and punishable by death. Most comfortable folks in Dover had always seen themselves as people who would have stood up and been heroes in those situations, the ones who would have the courage to face it all. But in that week, they had to ask themselves, was that true? Now we're considering staying home because of ugly signs and people shouting? There was soul searching. Families talked it through amongst themselves. As November 2nd dawned, I had no idea what they would decide or what would happen. When the hour approached, I had my answer. They came. They came in droves, the old, the young, the families with their children. They filled the church. There was standing room only. They not only had their God is Love signs from the week before, many had gone ahead and made their own. Some had made huge God of Love signs that they plastered across the side of their SUVs. Some told me that they drove out of their way to go find where the group was. Now we're sorry we're going to miss them, they said. They went to drive and figure out where they were protesting ahead of us so that they could drive by with their God is Love signs and show them. We began the service, and you could feel the energy in the congregation. At the end of the opening hymn, the room erupted in a spontaneous cheer. They were pumped. That week, going to church was not drudgery or duty. It wasn't even comforting or soothing. That week, going to church meant something in a way that it hadn't before. They had spent the week confronting their fears and deciding whether to take an actual risk to go to church and to stand for something bigger than themselves. And they won that battle with their fear. They faced down their fears with the love of God, and love won. They had found their courage. They stood tall and proud, and the cheer was for God, it was for themselves, and it was for the love of the world that almost melted the church walls. The Westboro folks arrived on schedule. I had ushers watching for them in case they tried to come onto the church property. Once they realized we had thwarted their effort at being seen between the services, they did come and try to head for the church doors, but the Dover police were right behind them, chased them out. In the days and weeks that followed, we got tremendous support from the community, and we left our church sign covered with the big God is Love sign for many weeks. The church was stronger after that Sunday and remained so. They were less rattled by anything, really. And we were able to face down some other serious challenges with the confidence that we could meet those threats by remembering the day we felt God's love manifest in each one of us as courage. Another thing that Sunday made plain to me was how the infusion of meaning into our Sunday gathering eliminated the petty small things that too many churches fight about and that they had fought about. I did the unthinkable that week. I moved the time of both worship services. We blended the styles of worship. And with just a week's notice, everyone came at a different time. Nobody had their favorite style of worship. And literally, nobody cared. Nobody grumped that the service went too long. Nobody gave the side eye to somebody sitting in their pew. Nobody complained about the drums or the organ or fussed that we left out the creed. That Sunday, it became crystal clear that the core of our faith had nothing to do with any of that. Every person who showed up that morning knew why they were there and what they were standing for, and everything else faded from view. I tell you that story because I think we have been living through a long-form version of that time in Dover. That long week when we had to think about what going to church really meant and whether we were willing to give up things that were routine and comfortable and take some real risks in exchange for something that was bigger than ourselves. In our reality today, that week has now been almost a year of asking ourselves, what is church really all about? Where do I find meaning? Is there a love big enough that will give me the courage to stand up for what I say I believe, for what I think about myself? Am I participating in something bigger than myself? Have I been worried about things that really don't matter? Do my priorities need to shift? Hate groups of all kinds now march around us openly. What does it mean to proclaim God's love in their midst? The fires of the pandemic and political turmoil still rage around us. Our fears surround us. The threat is real. The long week drags on. Now is when the spiritual fruit of our lives takes shape, or doesn't. Now is the time when we discover what we truly believe, or don't. We are still having the discussions around the kitchen table, still wondering what will happen and who will come when our year-long week is finished and our long-awaited Sunday arrives. In the midst of that, I bring you good news. If we hold fast to the love of Christ, if we meet our fear with love, I have seen what that Sunday will look like. I have felt the power infused with the power of worship, infused with meaning and purpose. We are now struggling and huddled in our homes. The long week is not over, but the fruit is growing. Every time we meet hate with compassion, it ripens a little more. Every time we speak the truth with love, it grows. Every time we offer mercy instead of judgment, our branches strengthen. So that when that Sunday finally comes, we will know who and whose we are. We will know why we gather, and we will know why it matters. Our love will manifest as courage, and though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, we will not fear. Such is the power of love. Amen.
God is our present help in time of trouble. Though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though the waters roar and foam, we will not fear. Come, behold the awesome acts of God. He is our God. He is our God in all the earth. He is the rain, we are the stones. He will cleanse us. He is the air, we are His song. We will celebrate His presence all the day long. God is our refuge and strength, a present help in time of trouble. Though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though the waters roar and foam, we will not fear. We will not fear. We will not fear.
We return to God a portion of what has been given to us for God's work in our shared ministry. Friends and members are asked to prayerfully consider giving in support of Crawford's ministries and operations. You can give electronically by clicking the button in the weekly messenger or on our website, or mail a check to 34 Dick Street, Winchester, Mass. 01890. And now you can also text Crawford UMC to 44321. Thank you.